Patrick Bergen, come up here, buddy. Patrick, who's quite an Africanist and quite an organization manager himself, has been part of building this wonderful Africa Wildlife Foundation for many years. He's their CEO now. AWF hosted, back when you could still do it, AWF hosted a Codel we did East Africa that was enormously successful. Patrick was our guide. And we met AWF people throughout the mission, in the field, everywhere we went, extraordinary people, to the man and woman in the field, really giving their lives to do wonderful things. And they embody our message, and that is that there are marketplace solutions there for conservation needs, and we're real excited about having AWF as our partner.
Thank you, David. Nice to be with you all today. Thanks to the ICCF for organizing this lunch. Just going to take 2 or 3 moments to say a word about African Wildlife Foundation and to introduce my colleague, Dr. Helen Gichohi, who's the president of AWF and is going to speak to you and give a presentation. Just a word, if I may, about AWF's vision, I think, for conservation in Africa and at least our part in it. You know, one of the things we believe is that Africa needs development, needs to modernize, and that there's going to be cities, there's going to be agriculture, there's going to be roads. Many of the things that more developed parts of the world have, Africa wants and needs. And sometimes I think people in Africa think, wow, these conservationists want to keep us back. Maybe having wildlife means not having these other things. In AWF's vision, we're kind of very clear. We want to see progress in Africa. We want to see economic development in Africa. But we also feel that with good planning and foresight, we can select a number of very large, very valuable conservation landscapes, plan them, help to capitalize them, focus on them, and ensure that there is a place for wildlife in the future of Africa. So our program is really organized around this principle, the great future conservation destinations of Africa, if I can call them that. AWF's vision is to invest in these places for 15 years or more and to make sure that these places thrive ecologically and economically. And we call them the African Heartlands. And our program is built around this. We're going to hear about the fact that when AWF goes into a heartland area, there are usually parks and protected areas that we help to support. And then we are always looking for ways to tie that ecological and economic anchor of the national park to economic growth and improved livelihoods for the surrounding community. And we think this is essential. I might say we think this is very hard work, and I think organizations have tried it, and sometimes you succeed and sometimes you fail. We feel we don't have any choice. This linkage must be made. And so Helen's going to speak to us in the next few minutes, and she's going to give us 3 examples of AWF projects where our investments in protected areas have led to improved social services for communities. She's going to talk to us about a tourism example of how AWF has used tourism to improve livelihoods attached to a national park, and then also another example that has nothing to do with tourism. So with those few words, Helen's in town from Nairobi for a board meeting that we just completed yesterday, and I'll ask her to please come up and share these examples with us. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Very nice to see so many of you here today. I promise I will give you a very short message so that I can allow you to enjoy the rest of your lunch. I would hate for you to be invited again and fail to return because there was that woman who talked for too long. So I'll make this very short, and hopefully it will give you a flavor of some of what we are doing at the African Wildlife Foundation. Our brief presentation this afternoon is on protected areas, livelihoods, and economic growth. Let me figure out how this thing works, and then I can. Okay, I have. And I guess one might ask, what's the link between protected areas, livelihood, and economic growth? And why is it important? And how does conservation fit in all that? One, I think, just to set the background, many of you, all of you know, that Africa is a poor continent. It's a continent where poverty levels are high, but especially in the areas where AWF has selected and elected to work. Many of these areas are isolated areas, areas where wildlife thrives and does very well, but also these are regions where the economic opportunities for these communities are extremely limited. And in a sense, many of the communities believe that wildlife contributes to the poverty levels. Many of the governments also in Africa are struggling to raise money, to raise the finances that they require to finance development. And many of you know that are working in your current jobs that environment and environmental conservation is not usually prioritized by governments as an area of investment. And it happens to be true in Africa, that many governments are their first point of call when they have money for investment. It is not in the wildlife sector. So AWF really wants to ensure that as those governments struggle with the agenda of development, that conservation can be seen as one piece that is really important and that can drive development. And part of our program is really to help to demonstrate to government the value of conservation, the value of biodiversity, and the value of wildlife as a national asset for economic development. So we help work with governments to create those examples. The third thing that we do, and that is very clear to us as an organization, is in our mission that focuses on people and focuses on wildlife. One of the things we know from our experience working in Africa is that many communities are resource rich, but cash strapped. Very, very little cash, but a lot of wealth of resources. Many of you who know and have been to some of the vast areas of the Okavango, the Serengetis, many of the places that you see on Animal Planet and Discovery Channel, those are areas where people live. And those resources oftentimes belong to them, or they have a right over those resources. But oftentimes they don't know how to make money or commercialize those resources in a way that helps. So part of our program, again, is designed to make sure that those resources can become a source of economic development and a source of livelihood, but in a manner that does not destroy them or compromise their long-term viability. So as a way of, in the way of example, I would really like to not dwell on what our whole program deals with. We have a program that is extensive, is currently in 11 countries in Africa. We'll soon be in 14 countries. It is what we call a complex program, but we've mastered the complexity. And out of that complexity, we are delivering very, very strong conservation results as well as economic results. So what I really wish to do this afternoon is to just kind of give you a very, very tiny subset of some of the things we've done that will help to illustrate what we do with protected area authorities, not just to protect, but also to ensure that protected areas can be seen by government and can truly become centers of economic development and model examples of how we can conserve and develop simultaneously. And then the other examples will be devoted to our work with community groups and designed to conserve land, to conserve wildlife resources, to conserve biodiversity, but to create wealth for those communities in order to motivate them to conserve, but also as a way to demonstrate that money can be made from those resources.